So if you're an athlete and you're trying to bulk up, if you do it the same way a bodybuilder would or a general gym goer would, you'll end up getting slower, stiffer, and overall less cardio. I know this from personal experience because I spent 8 years of my life bulking up when I was playing football, and I did some of the 5 mistakes I'm about to share with you, and it definitely did decrease my athleticism and my performance. So here's just 5 ways you should bulk up differently than a bodybuilder to make sure you could get bigger while also increasing your athletic performance. The first thing is you need to train certain things that bodybuilders don't. For example, there's a muscle next to your shin called your tibialis, and that's super important for preventing knee injuries and ankle injuries and things like shin splints, but you'll never see it in the bodybuilding program. I have heard one bodybuilder mention it, which was John Meadows, but other than him, I've never heard anyone else mention it. Also, explosive lifts are super important if you're an athlete, so doing things like box jumps and kettlebell swings is super important, but again, you'll never see them in the bodybuilding program. Along with other things like your neck, which is super important for preventing concussions and using it for grappling, or your grip strength, which is super important if you're an athlete, or your core stability, which is super important in any sport you do. You won't see much of it in bodybuilding programs, but if you do need help with it, I actually have 3 videos on those subjects, which I'll link in the description below. But there's also a ton of other stuff bodybuilders neglect, like your hip flexors, which is super important for sprinting, or your balance, or other things like stretching and being flexible. And it's not like bodybuilding programs are ineffective or anything, it's just not going to prepare you for the sport that you're trying to do. Next thing I got from Faraz Zahabi, which is to train movements and not muscles. And this is because as an athlete, you pick stuff up, or you push someone, or you explode into a movement like when you're throwing a punch, or you kick a soccer ball. You don't just stand there and pose with big bulky muscles. So this is why if I wanted bigger legs as an athlete, instead of doing a leg extension, I would do something like a squat or a lunge because, that's a movement. Or if I wanted big arms, I wouldn't do bicep curls, I'll do something like a narrow grip pull-up. Or if I wanted big shoulders, I wouldn't get on the lateral delt raise machine. I would do something like a standing Arnold press with a kettlebell because that would give me good core stability while also getting my shoulders bigger. Also doing movements instead of like isolation exercise or machine exercises works on other things like your stabilizers. When it's a free weight, that uses a lot of different muscles. It will also give you more athletic strength and functional strength. Also, I feel like you'll get just as big doing a compound lift than you would doing an isolation or a machine movement. And the reason why I do a compound movement too is because if you're a bodybuilder, you have time to do like 5 different exercises for your biceps. But if you're an athlete, you have like a ton of other stuff to work on. So you really have to do the exercises that's going to give you the most ROI. For those of you that's not business majors, that means return on investment. Now that being said, I do think there's a time and a place for isolation lifts and machine movements. For example, if you're rehabbing an injury, like let's say you tear your bicep and it hurts too much to do pull-ups, but it doesn't hurt too much to do a bicep curl. Like obviously, yeah, do bicep curls until you're able to do pull-ups again. Another reason to do it would be if you have a specific weak spot. Like let's say your quad is specifically weak, so maybe it would be good to do some leg extensions in that case. But if you are going to use a machine, I would still save it to the end of your workout. I would still prioritize the compound movements you could do. Now, third thing is the rep schemes. Most bodybuilder stuff is usually 3 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 15, which is great for hypertrophy or for your accessory movements. But let's say you're doing a squat and you want to maximize your strength, which is important if you're an athlete. I think it might be better to do a 5 sets of 5, or something like build up to a 3 rep max. Or let's say you're doing box jumps, I'd say it's maybe better to do 8 sets of 3 if you want to maximize explosiveness. And this is because lower reps are usually better for building strength and explosiveness, because you could use a lot more weight when doing only 5 reps or 2 reps than if you're going to do 10 reps or 15 reps. Now, fourth thing is just a different diet than a bodybuilder. When I was playing football, one time I ate just a shit ton of lamb and a shit ton of bread. I'm not talking about a high quality sourdough bread, I'm talking about like a cheap sandwich bread. And that would be fine if I was bodybuilding or just trying to get bigger because all of this is just protein and carbs technically. But the thing is, I had practice right afterwards, and yeah, it was just a miserable practice. It just felt like a brick was sitting in my stomach, and yeah, it just was one of the worst practices I've ever had. Of course, if you're bulking, you still need to eat a lot, but what I recommend doing is just making sure all the foods that you eat are easily digestible. So something I highly recommend is the vertical diet. It's created by Stan Efferding, and he actually trains a ton of athletes like John Jones, Henry Cejudo, Thor Bjornsson, and he also trains bodybuilders too. I'll make another video on this, but basically his diet is centered around having foods that are super easily digestible. If you need a super easy recipe you can make, I actually have one, which I'll also link in the description description below. And I actually got that recipe from Stan Efferding too. It's just I made a few little tweaks to it. Now, this is probably the most important thing, but it's to practice your sport. So although lifting weights helped me out a ton with my football career, I still think I would have been better off if I did a little bit more field work and a little bit less lifting. I talked about it in my video, Does Westside Barbell Work for Football? But I was saying when I was in college, every Saturday, our cornerback coach would still expect us to get a workout in on Saturdays, even though we didn't have practice. And we kind of had a choice to either use the weight room and get a lift in, or go to the field and, get a field workout in. And probably about 85% of the time, I would go into the weight room and get a lift in, and 50% the field. But I think in reality, it should have been like 60% field work, 40% weight room. Or since lifting was a super big priority for me since I was undersized as a football player, I'd have maybe done like 50% weight room and 50% field work. But yeah, I really should have been prioritizing my sport more when I was playing football. But now that I'm doing Muay Thai, I lift 3 times a week, and I spend the majority of my time that I have to train doing actual Muay Thai and martial arts. And I could say it's working out a lot better for me that way. But yeah, even though bulking up and the strength and conditioning side of sports is super important, learning the skills for your sport is definitely more important. So if you're playing a sport like football or soccer, or you're training a martial art like jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai, you are aware how much of an advantage 10 pounds could make in your sport. It's literally the exact reason why there's weight classes in MMA and all the other combat sports. But just make sure to do the things I mentioned so you could get bigger without getting any less athletic. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comment section below. Also, if you're somewhat newish to lifting, I have a video on the first 6 exercises you should master, and also comes with a free workout in the description below you could do if you don't have anything else to follow. If you think that would help, make sure to check it out. I'll link it up right here. But if you are trying to bulk up for your sport, good luck with it. I know personally how much of a grind it was even just gaining 10 pounds. Make sure to do these tips if you are doing a sport though. I hope some of these tips helped, but thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.